just because you're married to someone doesn't mean that if Secretary Hegseth has one of the highest levels of classification access, he can't just hand that to his wife and say, here, honey, hold my beer and hold my classified information. It doesn't work that way.
Hi again, everybody. It is 5 o'clock here in New York. I'm Alicia Menendez in for Nicole Wallace. In what feels like many lifetimes ago, but was only just last year, a relatively new administration was dealing with Signalgate, the scandal that exposed how details of upcoming strikes on Yemen were shared in multiple group chats on the app Signal, including one with Atlantic editor Jeffrey Goldberg. Now, I bring that up today because Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's wife, Jennifer, was in another one of those chats. And as you just heard Senator Coons tell me and my co-anchors on the weeknight last year, her involvement is not normal. Now, there's new reporting in the New York Times that further exposes the outsized role Jennifer Hegseth plays alongside her husband. Quote, Mrs. Hegseth was for years Mr. Hegseth's producer at Fox News as he built a broadcast career. Now, 7 years into their marriage, she is his most influential advisor and his de facto producer at the Pentagon. She has prepped him for appearances, sat in on his meetings with journalists, interviewed potential members of his staff, and brainstormed ideas for the Defense Department videos he, and sometimes she, appears in. Like this video, where she is seen working out with sailors and Marines on the USS Boxer in Singapore wearing a "This is War" t-shirt. Yet Jennifer Hegseth's involvement goes much further than PR videos and prepping her husband for interviews. More from the Times, quote, last year she was in a highly sensitive meeting with her husband and top British defense officials after the United States temporarily stopped sharing military intelligence with Ukraine, the Wall Street Journal first reported. In a previously undisclosed part of that meeting, a Trump administration official told the New York Times the British indicated that they had officers on the ground in Ukraine, and that without the U.S. intelligence, including early warnings of incoming missiles from Russia, the officers' lives were at risk. The British spoke in general terms, the official said, because the presence of Mrs. Hegseth made them uneasy. Later, they had a smaller meeting without her to go into detail. The Pentagon's chief spokesman said Mrs. Hegseth was only in the meeting for introductions, left soon after, and has not been present for any Defense Department conversation or meeting where classified information was discussed. But a former chief spokesman for the Pentagon does not think this should be taken so lightly. John Uliat, who left after working under Pete Hegseth for 3 months, said, quote, it's bonkers the defense secretary would involve his wife in his sensitive official duties, including sharing details of an impending military operation and face zero consequences. Any president deserves better judgment from his national security leaders. And that is where we begin this hour with staff writer at The Atlantic, Tom Nichols. He's a professor emeritus of national security affairs at the U.S. Naval War College and military analyst. Retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling is here. He served as the commanding general of the U.S. Army in Europe. It is good to see you both. General Hertling, the Times said there has never been a Pentagon spouse quite like Jennifer Hegseth. How alarmed are you by this reporting?
Alicia, there's an important distinction between giving advice to your husband and listening, and the distinction between that and exercising government authority is quite an interesting issue. If Jennifer Hegseth helps her husband prepare for television interviews or offers private advice in their home at night, that's their business. I don't care. But if the reporting in the Times is accurate, and I think it probably is, and that she interviews potential employees or influences Pentagon media policy or listens into a classified conversation with allies, it's something different. I had a kind of a flashback when I was in the Pentagon, the one tour I had in the Pentagon, and I was working as the war planner, watching Secretary Rumsfeld have conversations with his combatant commanders from all around the world and discussing contingency plans. I can't imagine what would have happened back then if Mrs. Rumsfeld had been in the room with them and, these four-star admirals and generals would be discussing what they plan to do in their area of operations. It just doesn't make sense.
I mean, Tom, listen, this is a Secretary of Defense who already has a history of not understanding how to handle important classified information. You have this report that the British had to adapt their meeting because of Jennifer Hegseth's presence. It would be one thing if it were not interfering with our allies. The fact that you have other governments saying this is weird is embarrassing for us all.
It's also astonishingly unprofessional. This is not, no matter where you work, the rule is that, every day is not bring your spouse to work day. Does she have a clearance? Does she have a title? Is there some, accountable role that she fills? Look, the one thing Pete Hegseth and I have in common is we were both once Republicans, and nobody in the Republican side liked it when Bill Clinton said, I'm going to start bringing the first lady into policymaking with no Senate oversight, no other role. That was an understandable gripe to say, you can't just bring a family member in and sit her down and say, by the way, my wife's going to, look over our shoulders here on this meeting. I find it astonishing on so many levels, including the hypocrisy here. Hegseth is really the chief advocate for, manly men, gusto, testosterone, guys being guys, except that he apparently has to bring his wife with him everywhere, which to me, I'm sorry, but, I don't care if it's poker night or I'll just say this. My wife is my best friend, my closest advisor. I love her dearly. And yet she does manage to let me get out of the house unsupervised on occasion, trusting that I am not going to screw things up. This is a deeply weird, but also deeply unprofessional and, yes, damaging to the Defense Department arrangement. It shouldn't be happening, but it tells you something not just about Pete Hegseth, but about this whole circus that seems to be operating in the administration now.
Well, to that point, General Hertling, your latest piece is titled, Who Would Want to Be Friends with America Now? And in it, you write, alliances are relationships built over years, administrations, war, crises, and disagreements. Presidents inherit them from their predecessors, sustain them for their successors, and occasionally strengthen them through careful diplomacy. But presidents can also destroy them. That destruction rarely occurs with a formal announcement. More often, trust erodes incrementally. Can you speak to what this administration is doing to our standing in the world during this incredibly intense and complicated time?
Yeah, it is. I'm laughing at Tom because he's bringing it down to the gut level, Alicia, as he often does. And I love how he poses things. But I keep going back to imagine being a combatant commander or a service chief or a British defense official who's coming in for what you believe is an official conversation with the Secretary of Defense, and you need to find out what the classification level and the need to know of these defense plans are to his wife. It is just gobsmacking. I mean, my wife is my best friend too. And when I was serving, I would bring issues home to her and say, what do you think? Here's what I did on this. What do you think I did? And she would give me advice, but I'm not bringing her into the room to discuss those things that might be classified, because classification also means that you have a need to know. And Jennifer Hegseth does not have a need to know classified information. But in terms of our allies, they're all seeing this. This isn't just Jennifer Hegseth. What is Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff doing without classified information or security classifications, going around talking to other countries and seemingly having discussions about war plans and what's going to happen? If they want to be in government, unfortunately, they have to apply by the rules of government. So they're not just leaking information or using it for their business deals. It's specifically for the United States. And Alicia, I got to tell you, I know because I'm hearing from them, our allies are saying what's going on, and they are keeping secrets from us. And that's when it becomes dangerous.
Got new details today about the supply shortages on board the USS Lincoln and the lack of planning from Pete Hegseth's Pentagon ahead of President Trump's war of choice with Iran. For weeks, we've been reporting on the grim conditions on board as the war grinds on without any clear endgame, concerns about wear and tear from 6 months of constant combat, potentially putting service members at risk. A mental health crisis with reports of crew attempting to jump overboard, broken showers and toilets, rationing of food, shortages of basic essentials like soap or toothpaste. One retired Navy commander told MS Now, "We didn't plan for this war. We just sort of did it on the fly. And when you fight a war as a pickup game, this is the kind of stuff that happens." Let's bring in MS Now's Pentagon reporter Priya Sridhar. She has that brand new reporting today. Priya, tell us, what are the details here?
Hey, Alicia, I think this is such an important question, especially because so many of the officials in this administration have tried to deny that there were any supply shortages on this ship or deteriorating conditions. But essentially what we're learning is that Navy leaders are saying that when Bahrain got hit by Iranian missiles at the beginning of this war, that essentially caused a ripple effect. We saw thousands of non-essential personnel from that base get evacuated. And this is really Fifth Fleet's logistical headquarters. This is where Navy ships in the region would go to get resupplied. But of course, with the Lincoln, they haven't had a port call in 208 continuous days. And now supply ships weren't able to go to that base. So they had to look for an alternative option. In the past, the Navy has used ports in Kuwait or the United Arab Emirates, but those had similar problems where they were within striking distance of Iranian missiles. So then the Navy could have looked at trying to get supplies through the Mediterranean, but that would have involved the Red Sea. And they had the same concerns there because the Houthis were threatening to attack commercial vessels in the Red Sea. So they had to pivot to Diego Garcia, which is a tiny island in the Indian Ocean, 2,200 miles away from the Gulf of Oman, which is where these aircraft carriers were sitting. So instead of being able to resupply these ships every 3 days like they would have been able to do if they went to Bahrain, they weren't able to resupply the ships except in 10-day cycles. And Diego Garcia is simply just not big enough. It doesn't have the capacity to hold the amount of supplies that you would need for 2 carrier strike groups. So as you said in the very beginning, Alicia, at the heart of the matter here is Navy leaders are saying that simply the administration thought this was going to be a few weeks long war, and it's turned into now we're going into month 6. And that's really what has caused all of this to have a trickle down effect on the service members not being able to get food and basic hygiene supplies.
I want to play for you, Priya, some of what Congressman Greg Casar said about this situation. Take a listen.
On the USS Lincoln, we had our soldiers, our service members in deplorable conditions. Their parents, including their parents in my own district in Central Texas, were speaking out about this. And Donald Trump said, I wish the deployment could go longer. It should just go longer. We had Donald Trump lie and say we weren't going to get into forever wars. Then you've got Pete Hegseth saying we could be in the Strait of Hormuz, quote unquote, indefinitely. Those were his words.
Priya, what are you hearing from those military families now?
I think that, Alicia, there's a lack of trust between the service members' families and the administration because, like I said before, at the very beginning, they were told that this was going to be just a few weeks long mission. They were going to be able to come home potentially in May. And then they saw their deployment extended and extended. And then to make matters worse, essentially, we're hearing that the president is calling these service members and their families liars. And I think that these are some of the most patriotic people in our country. They've chosen to wear a uniform to defend our freedoms. And so to call them liars, I think it's really a slap in the face. And I had one family member say that she essentially feels like she's being gaslit, like their concerns are being minimized here. And so what they are really trying to focus on right now is the positive news in all of this, which is that the Lincoln is on its way home to San Diego finally. And they truly believe that none of that would have happened had they not all spoken out about this in the first place.
Under Pete Hegseth's leadership, we could see an unprecedented change to who is honored by our nation's military. Navy leadership is reportedly working to rename a new aircraft carrier that's under construction. And instead of honoring a heroic sailor, as was planned, they would name it instead for President Trump. That is according to 3 sources familiar with internal discussions who talked to CNN. NBC News has also confirmed the story. We should note the Navy directed CNN's questions to the Defense Department, which said it had nothing to announce at this time. But as we absorb this news, which would give an unprecedented honor to a sitting president, we also wanted to talk about Doris Miller, the man the ship is supposed to be named for. Doris Dory Miller was born in Waco, Texas, and enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1939. The son of sharecroppers, played a key role defending U.S. forces during Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. On that day, according to the National Museum of the Pacific War, Miller was retrieving laundry when bombs began falling. He was a mess attendant, third class, one of the few roles open to black men in the Navy at that time. Miller, quote, arrived on deck where he encountered his mortally wounded commanding officer and carried him to safety. He proceeded to one of the machine guns, and although black sailors never received training on the anti-aircraft guns, he opened fire on the Japanese planes overhead. After the gun ran out of ammunition, Miller assisted in evacuating sailors after the order to abandon ship and was one of the last 3 men to leave the vessel as it sank. Even after leaving the ship, he helped numerous sailors to safety. Miller was the first black service member to receive the Navy Cross, the Navy's second highest honor. The USS Doris Miller would be the first aircraft carrier named after a black and an enlisted sailor. But now, the same defense secretary who's reportedly blocked the promotions of numerous black and female officers may take that incredible honor away in order to honor a president who never served in our military. With us now, Basil Smikle, a Columbia University professor, Democratic strategist, and MS Now political analyst, and retired Rear Admiral John Kirby. He is a former White House National Security Communications Advisor and an MS Now national security analyst. Basil, what does it say that this is even being considered?
It is a disgusting, despicable chapter in our country where you have a president and a party, honestly, that is trying to redefine what it means to be a citizen and a patriot in this nation. As you correctly said, that as an African-American sailor, there are very few jobs available to him. In fact, most African-American sailors were given service-oriented jobs, not leadership positions. But he showed leadership in that moment and was awarded a Navy Cross, if I remember correctly, for that. And if I read this right, this distinction was granted during the first Trump administration. So why now? Why the change? Well, it seems clear to me that, again, the president is leaning into redefining what it means to be a citizen and a patriot in this country. And you see a lot of the language that addresses that particular issue, that people who protest this nation, people of color, aren't really Americans. But that act in and of itself, and just the service in and of itself, is an extraordinary definition of what it is to be patriotic, to love this country. And it's also part and parcel to the larger erasure of people of color from the history of this country.
Admiral, we know Pete Hegseth's history with blocking black female candidates from promotion lists. How much sway does the defense secretary have on the naming of an aircraft carrier? Because there is both the honor that is being taken away, and there is the other piece of this, which is the desire to bestow that honor upon the sitting president.
The Secretary of Defense has enormous sway over the decisions of the service secretaries on a lot of things, and this is one of them. Now, the way it works, the convention is that the Secretary of the Navy is the one who decides what ships are going to be named or renamed, and the Secretary of the Navy has pretty much carte blanche. But of course, in any White House and any administration, they're going to make sure that the Secretary of Defense is plugged in and supportive of that. So Mr. Hegseth has a lot of sway here. Look, I taught naval history at the U.S. Naval Academy a long, long time ago, back when I was just a youngster. And you can't teach naval history to Naval Academy midshipmen without talking about Pearl Harbor. And you can't talk about Pearl Harbor without talking about Dory Miller and what he did that day, an incredible hero. Now, they're talking about maybe renaming another ship for him. I hope that they do that, because this is a man who deserves to have a U.S. Navy ship sailing under the American flag in his name. I agree that this is really more, in my view, about a vanity project for Donald Trump and making sure that he gets his name on yet another big thing than it is anything else. But it does send a very chilling message, I believe, and I agree, to African Americans in particular in the Navy and in the military about their value. I think there's another component here, Alicia, and that is that Mr. Hegseth has been on this culture war inside the Pentagon, diminishing the role of female leaders, diminishing the role of minorities, talking about merit and standards when, in fact, merit and standards has never really changed. And I do think that this will send a message to African Americans and people of color in the military that their service is maybe not as important as history would record that it actually has been.
Amazing that this is the conversation that we are having about where time and attention is at the Pentagon while we have the president's war of choice raging with Iran. John Kirby, thank you so much for your time. Basil, I'm going to ask you to stay with me.
First, it was the outside press. Now it is the Pentagon's own paper. The publisher of Stars and Stripes is retiring, saying the paper's mission has changed under Pete Hegseth. Max Lederer led the paper for nearly 20 years. In a memo to staff reviewed by the AP, he said, "It has become clear that my philosophy of leadership and my understanding of the mission of Stars and Stripes differ in fundamental ways from the direction of the Department of Defense and what it has for the new organization." So what exactly has changed? Sean Parnell, chief Pentagon spokesperson, announced the Pentagon would be refocusing the content of Stars and Stripes away from, quote, woke distractions. Here's what he posted on X. The ombudsman, who was responsible for keeping the newspaper independent from DoD interference, was fired. Her name is Jacqueline Smith, and her outgoing column declared the Pentagon was trying to silence her. There it is. According to CBS News, 1.4 million people see it every day, the Stars and Stripes, and their reporting has not shied away from being critical of the military itself, at least in the past. Reporting on issues with unsafe military housing, ammunition production falling short, and cybersecurity failures in some branches' accounts. More recently, it's exposed problems on the USS Lincoln. So who might replace Lederer as the publisher? No word from the Pentagon, but leadership might not let him go so smoothly. CBS News is citing U.S. officials who report leadership discussed firing him before his retirement takes effect.
Today, I should tell you the USS Abraham Lincoln is finally heading home after a brutal and record-breaking time at sea. The aircraft carrier and its crew of about 5,000 sailors are on their way to San Diego. We here on the show have been covering the concerns of family members of those aboard the Lincoln for a while now. Concerns about sailors' mental health, their safety on deck, a lack of supplies, food shortages, water contamination, you name it. Family members say the situation on the ship had become so dire that multiple sailors have attempted to go overboard. Now, of course, the Pentagon has denied all of these concerns. Trump himself has even denied the very fact that military families are concerned, which is quite a thing to deny. And while a lot of reporters have done a really excellent job covering what has been happening on the USS Lincoln, including our colleagues here, Priya Sridhar and Lindsay Papia, but one outlet's coverage has been particularly notable. The military newspaper Stars and Stripes, the one I just mentioned in Talking with Ali. And that's because as a publication partially funded by the Pentagon, their coverage was effectively reporting on themselves. While a lot of civilians might be unfamiliar with their work, Stars and Stripes is a key part of our news ecosystem. If you work in government, if you work in national security, you definitely read Stars and Stripes, as do so many military families across the world. The paper was founded during the Civil War and has been continuously published since World War II. While other news outlets chase all sorts of stories, Stars and Stripes is just focused on what is happening in our military, day in and day out. They have a record of reporting on the military objectively, even on sensitive topics that might make the military look bad. For military members and their families all around the world, it is a key news source. It's also a key news source for us in the larger news world. And the reason it is so key is because it is editorially independent from the Pentagon, or at least it has always been. Now, back in January, the Washington Post reported that applicants for jobs at Stars and Stripes were being asked how they would support President Trump's policies. They were asked questions like, how would you advance the president's executive orders and policy priorities in this role? And identify one or two relevant executive orders or policy initiatives that are significant to you and explain how you would help implement them if hired. Not exactly the kind of questions you would ask an independent newspaper to ask its prospective hires, right? Well, it turns out leadership in the newspaper didn't know that these questions were being asked. They were being asked automatically by the government website that prospective hires applied through. They were being asked by the Trump administration, essentially. Now, the day after that report, the Pentagon's chief spokesperson, Sean Parnell, tweeted that the Pentagon was returning Stars and Stripes to its original mission, reporting for our warfighters, which to him meant, quote, and these are his words, refocus its content away from woke distractions. Now, the first real clue as to what that actually meant came from the conservative outlet, The Daily Wire. Pentagon officials told The Daily Wire that the plan was for the paper's content to be written by active duty service members, with 50% of the paper's content composed of materials generated by the Pentagon. And amazingly, no one told the people who actually ran Stars and Stripes that was the plan. The editor-in-chief of the paper, Eric Slavin, told the New York Times that all he had to go on was what he had read in the Daily Wire. Now, for its entire history, Stars and Stripes has been partly funded by the Pentagon, and its staffers have been Defense Department employees. But Congress mandated the publication be independent. Congress even mandated that the newspaper hire an ombudsman whose entire role would be defending the paper's editorial independence. In response to questions the Trump administration was making their prospective hires answer, the paper's ombudsman at the time, Jaclyn Smith, told the Washington Post, quote, asking prospective employees how they would support the administration's policies is antithetical to Stripes' journalistic and federally mandated mission. A few months later, the Pentagon issued a memo drastically expanding its oversight of the paper. The memo barred the paper from running stories from wire services like the Associated Press and even banned cartoons from being run. And most importantly, stated that the paper's content had to be consistent with, quote, good order and discipline. Now, as the paper's ombudsman told CBS News, they could say anything is against good conduct. The paper's ombudsman told the Washington Post that the memos threatened Stars and Stripes' continued editorial independence and that it did so at the detriment of the troops who rely on the newspaper for complete coverage and continued accurate coverage that is not propaganda. A month later, she was fired. And she put it in her final column. Apparently, the Pentagon also doesn't want you to hear from me anymore about threats to the editorial independence of Stars and Stripes. That's what she wrote in her final column. No official reason was given for her firing, but she also wasn't able to contest it. And then last month, one of the newspaper's reporters, Laura Cordy, gave one of the most appropriate statements I could really ever imagine a reporter giving about her role at the paper. Here was that statement, given as part of an interview with CBS News.
I'm working for Stars and Stripes, not for the Pentagon, not for any administration, not for any policymaker. I'm here to cover the military community.
Today, Cordy was fired. In a statement, she said that the Defense Department had fired her for insubordination because of her statement to CBS, because she said she works for Stars and Stripes and not the Pentagon, because she said that paper was independent. Today, the Pentagon also fired the paper's editor-in-chief. The editor-in-chief says he was fired for insubordination over something he said in an interview when answering a hypothetical question about his journalistic standards, a question about where his red line would be if the Pentagon attempted to censor or withhold unfavorable news.
Do you have red lines in your mind?
Yes, I do.
Give me a red line.
Well, don't run a perfectly accurate story. Run this instead. Here it is, written by the Pentagon. That would be a red line.
Joining me now here at the table is Eric Slavin, who you just saw in that clip, the editor-in-chief of Stars and Stripes, who was fired today by the Pentagon. And with us live from Germany is Laura Cordy, a Stars and Stripes reporter who was also fired today. Thank you both so much for being here. I know today must have been a whirlwind for both of you. Let me start with you, Eric. For people who are just tuning into this, we just gave them a whole lot of information there. We tried to. Walk us through what happened today.
Well, certainly this was not what I expected when I woke up in the morning. I was going about my job. I was planning stories. I was planning one of Laura's stories, actually, about the Navy evacuees from Bahrain and the challenges that they're facing. And then around 12:30 in the afternoon, I received a notice of proposed separation from the Pentagon Public Affairs Office.
An email?
An email, yes. The email said that I would be separated in no less than 5 business days.
And did they give you any explanation in that email?
Yes, they pointed to the CBS interview, and they said that my hypothetical that you just saw, which didn't say I would disobey anything or contradict anything. It simply said that I would affirm what the policy is, which is no news censorship or management. And that's That's been the DoD policy. That's been in the National Defense Authorization Act, and it's been in a number of places. So I feel like I affirm that, but they consider that insubordination.
And that was the clip we just played, to be clear. That's
Yes.
what they're saying you were fired for today.
Mm-hmm.
Let me bring you into this, Laura. I know, and I just read part of the statement, but again, for people who were tuning into this story, and you were coming to us from Germany. So first of all, thank you for being up with us and sharing this. I think it's so important for people to hear about. When and how did you learn that you were fired today?
My timeline was quite similar to Eric's. As he mentioned, we were working on putting out a story today, going about our jobs. And it was more like 6:30 p.m. my time, I received an email with the notice of separation.
And were you given a similar reason? Were you given a reason in that email as well?
Yeah, similarly, they cited the CBS interview. They specifically cited the comment that you referenced about how I work for Stars and Stripes, which is in fact a statement of fact and a reaffirming of our editorial independence. And they said they consider that insubordination and similarly gave me a 5-day period.
I have to ask, I mean, as I noted, I'm a reader of Stars and Stripes. We've used your reporting, as we've talked about, the USS Abraham Lincoln and a number about the war in Iran and a number of other occasions. Stars and Stripes has been reporting on everything from munition shortages, accurate accounts of the number of service members, something that we don't always have accurate information on from the Pentagon, as well as military families stranded in the Middle East. Laura posted a story on that just today. I just wonder how you think about your firing in the context of all that reporting.
Well, I'm very proud of the reporting that we've done, especially in recent weeks. We were the first to report many details of what happened aboard the USS Lincoln. And I'm concerned about the future rights of service members to a free and independent press. I think that what we do is one of the greatest expressions of American values that we can show the world. We believe in the First Amendment so much that we are willing to partially fund a newspaper that at times may hold government to account.
I know this is not what they stated. They stated specifically the CBS News report, but or your interview, I should say, is there any part of you that is concerned that some of the reporting that was critical of the handling of the war or some of those topics I just mentioned was a factor here?
Well, as you said, it wasn't in the separation notice that I received, so it's hard for me to speculate if that was a factor, but we do know that the administration wasn't happy about the reporting. They didn't single out Stars and Stripes, but they did talk about the reporting on the USS Lincolns.
Laura, what do you also posted a story just today. It was about families who've been evacuated from Bahrain and the challenges they're going through. We can reshare that as well. I've gone through a lot of your reporting today. What do you think? Do you have that concern that even though it wasn't stated in the email to you that it could have been a factor?
I mean, it's hard to say at this point. Similar to Eric, there was no mention of any specific articles in my notice of separation. I will say we have been, covering this protracted conflict in Iran pretty diligently for the past 6 months, and I'm really proud of the coverage that me and my colleagues have produced. I think it's important. There are families and service members going through a lot right now, and some people may feel like that reflects good or bad on, the government given the situation, but it's simply the truth. It's simply the fact of the matter. And we feel like we owe it to service members to share the reality about their experiences.